Greetings, Lee Carroll.
Happy to be here.
So I would like to go maybe somewhat deeper in some of the topics that was talked about yesterday. And one thing I found interesting was the terms physics of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So you have the word physics, that's more empirical notion, science. Yeah. You have this more elusive term, consciousness. Yeah. So you put the two together, you have like this more precise data, and you have a more abstract concept of consciousness. How do you bring these two to function together?
The answer is, and let me just say, they belong together, and we don't know it yet. For instance, if you want to take a look at chemistry, and you look at a time before germs, the idea of something that was invisible, that actually could attack you, that was bad for you, and it was on your food, it might be on your hands, to a scientist was laughable. And then there were the esoteric ones who said, there's some invisible stuff out there that can hurt you. Then, of course, we come with the microscopes, which is an invention, and the microscopes actually then bring that esoteric version of something invisible into science. This is what Cryan says. You just haven't seen it yet. Consciousness has power. It has energy. For instance, let me just give you this. What is love? And how would you actually define it? First of all, is it real? And you would say, oh yeah, it's real. I mean, it affects your chemistry. If you're in love with somebody, the love of a child, your firstborn, all of these things has so much energy, and yet you look at it as elusive, esoteric, invisible. What if you had an invention, an instrument that actually then could measure something that says, yeah, look, it's got waves, it's got patterns, it's got all of these things. That's physics. Consciousness, actually, according to Cryan, is one of the multi-dimensional players of the planet. So we have gravity, which you cannot see and you cannot measure in any way except, dropping a stone. That's pretty elementary. You really cannot see it. It's a multidimensional force. It's invisible. Magnetics is very, very similar. Even light has a multidimensional attribute. Consciousness is next. And Cryan said, when you start seeing that which has form, you'll say, there's physics here and there's rules. Then you will say, well, no wonder when I concentrate on something, when I say affirmations on something, I can see the patterns changing. It's physics. The words I say in the air have energy, and I can see it, and I can measure it. This is what Cryan says is coming. Now, why is this important to us as esoteric people? The reason is because suddenly, the whole planet can see what we have known just forever. And that is what we think not only helps us inside, we're broadcasting an energy. And this energy that we broadcast with whatever you say, whether it's peaceful intention, whether it is just good thoughts, actually does something. It's not esoteric and the clouds, just a sweet thing that floats around. You can measure it. This then becomes, I would say, palatable. It's more real than ever before. And more people then will start practicing what they can see. Esoterics has been this way forever. We know certain things work. It's very, very difficult to measure them. It's very, very difficult to tell other people, yes, this is working for us or whatever, because there's been no actual way to see it except the results that we see in ourselves. This is going to change peace on earth. It's going to change the way we solve problems. It's going to change the way you raise children. You'll be able to see projected energy, how consciousness actually makes and moves things happen. Yesterday we talked about the experiments on the planet. There have been very few of them, but Princeton University is one who is measuring the effects of consciousness on the magnetic field of the planet, through coherence. Institute of Heart Math is another one. This is coming. And so this is what we want to tell people. It's not about science, it's about our spirituality that suddenly comes more alive to us when we can actually see the results as the experiments are going to give us. Is that helpful?
So you're saying that eventually our science will be able to measure a kind of consciousness field around a person?
Even better. Let me give you something that you'll see is perhaps unbelievable. We have had a lot of scientific discovery. First of all, let me be clear. I am not trying to demystify God. Would you agree with me that God is the master physicist? God created the planet, I believe this. God created us, I believe this. God, in His infinite wisdom and all, put us here in lesson with our souls, this intricate system. It's all part of physics. Physics is God. So don't look at me and say, well, hey, you're trying to make a God into a scientist. God is a scientist. God is the creative energy that put this all together. So what we're doing is discovering more about this beautiful system that God created. So here's what the next, what Christ said is the next potential world-changing invention. When it's coming, who knows? It's the ability, finally, for us to see and measure quantum fields. The quantum physics has been with us a long time, and every time I open that bag of quantum physics, I'm astonished because they say, a quantum physicist teaching a school will say, forget everything you think is real and take a look at this. When you open the bag of quantum physics, nothing works like you think it works. You can have objects in two places at once, just all manner of things that just don't fit your reality. This is what quantum physics has been touching for years. Entanglement, things that you're just starting to hear about. Very real things that really sound like metaphysics. Meta is beyond physics. So what would happen if you could measure suddenly a quantum field? What would you see? And what Krein had said, the first thing, after you look at the stars and the sun and all, you start looking at life. And you will find we all have quantum fields, and one of the biggest ones is around the human being. Now, we have named this, actually we didn't, it was named in 2 Kings of the Old Testament by Elisha and Elijah as the Merkaba, the energy around a human being, 8 meters wide. This is so common in so many belief systems. What if it was literally, you could see it? What if it was measurable? It should be. It's physics. What would this do to science? They would say, what is this thing? What does it do? What are the patterns in it? And now they're going to start studying what we have all known and believed for years and years. In the Merkaba is so much. It's our health, it's our belief, it's our even the perhaps our Akashic record. They may not agree with that, but they can see patterns finally. So do you see how this might actually change what science then starts to see about spirituality? It's going to meld at some time where they're going to start studying what is it and realize this is the creative source in us.
We've known each other for more than 15 years. We're so good friends now. But still, there's Lee Carroll and his consciousness, and I am who I am with my consciousness. It's two things. It seems separate. How do you see consciousness evolve? The way I understand it is that once we're opening spiritually, get the heart opening, there's be a kind of coming together of consciousness. How do you see us evolving in communicating or feeling consciousness around us?
A great question, Mark, and I want the listener to know I have no idea what you're going to ask. I love it this way. You ask what you wish to ask, and it's always perfect. This falls into the Krein teaching perfectly. Let me explain this in an elementary form. There is something Krein says over and over. He says, you don't know what you don't know. In other words, there is a vast amount of knowledge that we have never experienced, we don't know about, and so there's almost like a cap on our imagination to see something we have never seen. What we have never seen is something so obvious that is going on, and he said, let's talk about consciousness. Human consciousness has another word to many people, human nature. What is the human nature of humanity? And they will say, well, what we have seen over thousands of years is human nature. We kill ourselves, we go to war, we tend to repeat history, and we never learn anything. If you study European history specifically, because that is the most accessible to us, we find a pattern that's absolutely unbelievable if you look at it logical. We war with ourselves, and it's the same players and the same countries over and over doing the same things. They'll be conquering, then there'll be a peace for a month, and then there'll be another army, and it'll sweep this way. They'll conquer and pillage, they'll settle down, then another country, same countries, and there's about the same 5 countries in Europe that have conquered each other for thousands of years. We haven't learned anything. This is a static...
Please, I'm sorry, there was an interference.
Okay,
just the
where do you want me to go?
Phrase. We never learn.
Okay. We never really learn anything. In other words, we keep repeating an energy that does not grow. There's no evolution. Now, I want you to think for a moment, well, that's just the way the earth is. Really, does it have to be that way? Does it make sense that consciousness has never evolved? It has always stayed in a survival mode. We're in a shift. We're in a change. The ancients of the planet have seen it. They've called it, and all over the planet. They said 2012 was the measure. If we make it past that, something is going to happen. And the something is the answer, Mark, to your question. The something is the beginning of consciousness evolving. Now, what does it mean? I'll give you a little metaphor. Please excuse me if you've heard it before, and then I'll continue with how it affects our consciousness. And that is this. When you have children, and we do, and we have certain levels of consciousness. An 8-year-old playing in a playground with other 8, 6, 7-year-olds will have an entire different experience than a 19-year-old. The 8-year-old is just getting used to other peers. You've got some who are bullies and they're throwing rocks and some calling names. You've got the peer pressure to dress a certain way. You go home crying because somebody said something to you. You're always in protection mode. You're not understanding necessarily what's going on. You're kind of feeling what it's like to be a human being. That's in a playground when you're 8. By the time you get to 19 or 20, your socialization, you've grown. Now you understand. Now you understand who your friends are. You're together. You're singing. You're having a good time. You go to parties. You're polite. There's an etiquette, and it's natural, and it's beautiful, and you're at peace with the bullies or those who used to call you names. What has gone on is an 8-year-old to a 19-year-old had a change of consciousness and an evolvement. We are still in the playground. And Christ says, you may doubt that, but look at history. You never grew out of survival. It's though you weren't smart enough. Christ says, this is an old energy cap that you have created and kept yourself there, and it is about to release. In fact, it is releasing slowly now. When we published The Indigo Children, this was over 10 years ago, this was a revolution. It was Hay House's best-selling book of that year, and we never expected that because people were seeing the changes in kids we were talking about. All of these kinds of things is the earmark of a changing, evolving consciousness. Now, what is it going to evolve into, and what does that really mean? It means that we're going to start seeing something different in consciousness that we've never seen. We're going to see a bigger picture. You have an individual consciousness, Mark. I do too. What if we suddenly started an awareness where, hey, they're connected? We never saw the connection. They're not only connected, we can work with each other doing things we never thought we could with what we thought were individual consciousnesses. You know, in Scripture, it says it over and over. It says, where two or more are gathered together, things change. You can do something more with a group of prayers, those who are praying, than you can with one. This is a principle we got, thousands of years ago, and now we're beginning to understand, what if this actually means an evolving human spirit? Now we get out of survival mode, we're starting to become grown-ups, and we're starting then to see the elegance of communicating consciousnesses. Peace on earth, according to Cryan, is going to be a given, a natural. It's not the end all, it's the beginning. We're going to settle it and go, why did this take so long when the principles were always there in front of us? Because we evolved and we're finding out things that we never ever knew before, or we didn't even suspect before. We're talking about this earlier. The wild card, men and women who have given us things that nobody ever considered. We have a system. I grew up as an engineer and a recording engineer. We have a system of music. I worked with the recording companies all my life. We had a system, a structure, the way music worked on earth until Steve Jobs showed up. And he turned it on its ear. And he actually created something nobody thought of, everybody said wouldn't work. And not only did it work, it's the way we work today. It's a wild card of consciousness that was never even thought of. We're going to have a lot of these, and they're going to create solutions to things that were unsolvable in the Middle East, here, in politics. Do you realize how dysfunctional politics is worldwide? Worldwide. Doesn't matter who's having an election or what it is, you have the same dysfunctions everywhere. And this is going to change as well. Business, it's dysfunctional. It's dysfunctional in greed. It doesn't have a balance that it has a win-win situation for everybody. That's not really how business works. It's greed-based. Banking is greed-based. What if this started to change through a higher consciousness and it was simply intuitive? Of course we should do it this way. Look how many people win. We still make money. They get their house. It's something we have not yet really seen. Answering to Mark's question is this: we are individuals, we have individual souls and individual consciousness, but what if at a higher level we start seeing a connection that we never saw before, where you and me are allied?
Are one.
Are one.
We'll find that.
It's the oneness of spirit.
Yes. So this higher consciousness will have an impact in how we perceive reality.
Oh, yeah.
In one of the teaching of Cryan also is the new faculties of human. So like new doors of perceptions are opening. I know that I was recently in Finor in Scotland. Mm-hmm. So the origin was speaking with the nature spirits and the divas. So there was a new communication opening with them.
With nature.
With nature. That's one aspect. But how do you see us opening to new reality, like a wider band of perception of reality? What will we be perceiving?
You know, the answer is how do I see it? I see it slowly. It's going to happen not as a revolution. It's going to happen naturally, generationally. Your children that you have right now are very different than mine were when I had mine. They're a completely total generation difference. There's 30 years, maybe 40 difference in the ages of your children and mine. And if we took a look at who they were, what we did, you would see it's already happening. They're thinking differently. Their solutions are different. The children of today even are more solution-oriented than mine were. They just wanted to get through whatever it was and move on and party. Children of today are actually looking at issues and trying to solve them even as they go to school. There is a very slow evolution taking place. Now, Cryan is even given what I'll call the ABCs of this. Can I just tell you one of my favorite scientific attributes? It was channeled in Israel. It's been channeled before, and that is where, our solar system goes around the middle of the galaxy. It does it very, very slowly. but we're always in motion. That means that our solar system is always in new areas of space, always. Space that we've never been in before, because it takes millions of years to go around this thing, and we've, as humans, have only experienced a few thousand, really. So we're only just creeping around the middle. Well, what some scientists are saying, and astrologers, is that there has been some kind of a gaseous protective bubble that has surrounded our solar system for eons, and we're losing it. It's going away. As oddly enough, in 2012, it's starting to move away, and we're moving into a new area of space that has odd radiation in it. Now, this is not cryon, this is astronomy, and this is science. What cryon has said is this: the movement of the magnetic grid, which you always knew was cryon's issue, was posturing the magnetic grid to receive the new radiation that we are now coming into. That then postures helps posture the consciousness that we have to evolve into. We've got help. This is not magic. So think of it this way: the Earth actually is being prepared for a higher vibration. And this astronomy that I'm talking about, 26 years of channeling from cryon about the magnetics, starts to come together, and you go, aha, maybe magnetics really is involved in human consciousness, and we are then able to think differently. So these things are going to happen through generations, slowly, and they're going to be more natural than a revolution. What they're going to create, however, is those who are thinking differently and then those who are thinking the same. Cryon says there's going to be a split. Those who won't go with the new and those who are wanting to go with the new. Just like everything else, there's a battle coming, and the battle is more of the old thinkers and the new thinkers. We've seen this in history as well, but that's what's coming. So it's coming slowly, and it's going to be something that in generations they're going to look back and go, look, it started here. This whole pattern started here. So the channel yesterday was that the 2012 marker, the very one that the Mayans called when the end of their calendar and the beginning of a new Mayan calendar, the end of that calendar is almost like what happened in time with AD and BC. Mm-hmm. They will, in hundreds of years, they'll look back and they'll say, this was the beginning. Everything before it was the barbaric age. Now we have grown up. Nobody's fighting like they used to. We haven't had a world war in 150 years. We're not gonna. There are things and alliances that we never had before, nobody ever thought of. And they're going to start changing. They'll make a marker. Well, I don't know what they're going to call it. But like time restarted itself here in some way. So you have BC and you have AD and you have whatever this is, the age of compassion. So this is what cryon speaks about. I don't know if I'm going to see it in this body to the extent that he talks about it. But he also says we're all going to see it. We're all coming back. And we're all playing a part in this evolved spirit. It's not going to be easy. Finally, let me tell you this, and I say finally in this discussion about this very thing, because we're talking about changes, we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about potentials. You watch the news. My kids, who are in their 40s, turned off the news. They have streaming television sets. You go into a television set store today, you buy a set, it streams. You don't have to watch cable or anything. You can choose what you wish to watch on the internet. And they have done that. So they watch the news they wish to watch, the programs they wish to watch, and all of these things. But this in itself is a new consciousness. When you realize now we're having choice in a way we never had before. Even instead of just being given what others are giving us and then absorbing it and going, that's the way things are, suddenly the whole world is opening. And this is just one little piece of an evolved spirit. Social networking. We've never seen a situation before where literally millions of young people, and not just young people, can look at each other and talk to each other at the same time. You can't hide anything. Years and years ago, Cryon said, when everybody can talk to everybody, there can be no secrets. That's a paradigm changer. That's going to change how we think, how we react to things, and what we do about it. So you're in the middle of these kinds of things. Paradigms. Google. When it first started, it violated, in my opinion, business. How was anybody going to make money with Google? Here's a free service. If I had told this to my grandparents, someday there'll be a free service where you can find out anything in the world at your fingertips for free, and you never have to pay one penny. And it's there, and it's there. It's like a free library in your pocket. And then the next question is, well, is that going to be government funded? Because that's the only thing you can think of. How are they going to pay for it? They didn't know. And I think it took them 3 or 4 years to find out. A brand new paradigm of win-win business. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about. You don't know what you don't know and what's coming. So I know I'm getting verbose. So what I wanted to really tell you is that one of the scariest things Brian has talked about, he says that when light starts to win, darkness will react. When light starts to win, darkness will react. And what he says is that when darkness on this planet, call it whatever you want to call it, low consciousness. Darkness is not an entity, it's not Satan, it's low consciousness. When it starts to see it's threatened, it's always had its way, whether it's the Illuminati, whether it's control of humanity, no matter how, it's always had its way. When it starts to lose, because of social networking, because my kids don't want to watch the news anymore, whatever it is, when it starts to lose, it's going to raise up, collect everything it can, and fight us in a way it never has fought us before. It's happening right now. You've got a dark army in Europe. The first time in human history is an army without borders and doesn't even have a common language. This is an army, Brian even talked about it, he predicted it, it would happen, and it's because light is starting to win. They're pulling out the stops. Did you ever think we'd see mass beheadings on television? This is pure evil, dark consciousness that is trying its best to frighten us, scare us, and bring us back to an old consciousness that was warlike for the planet. I hope you see that. It's just night and day to me. It's here. It was expected. And by the way, we'll win. But these are the kinds of things Klein has been talking about now for a long, long time.
In May 2017, we'll have in France a conference looking at new governance and new ways that man will deal with economic exchange in this new consciousness coming about. In Quebec, in May 2016, we wish to explore more going to this heightening consciousness or discovering it will bring us to see new reality and new life forms also that exist on Earth and what we call new or higher dimension. Does Brian has some information who we will be meeting in this new consciousness, the highly evolved life form that exists on Earth also?
We make decisions based upon our own reality and bias. We think it's going to be a certain way because it has been a certain way. Brian says it's like back in the days of buggy whips. If you say, what is the future of transportation? They'll say, an advanced buggy whip. Because you didn't know what you were going to find later. What if it's not about life forms as we think of them, but life awareness? You have a situation where suddenly you see a system. For instance, in one of your authors, Monica Morani, who wrote The Gaia Effect. Mm-hmm. The Gaia Effect is about this. It's about awareness that you are now related to higher energies. It's actually in your soul, and you don't think about that. So when you walk into the forest, if you're a tree hugger, for instance, you feel things. And you believe it's from an outside source. What if it wasn't? What if it's not an awareness of how connected you are to Gaia? How connected you are. What if the divas in the forest are not separate with their own little names and their own little world, but they're peripherally part of God, which is part of you. So inside your Merkaba is much bigger awareness than you've ever had before. They belong to you. They're not outside of you. This is an awareness. Nobody's thinking this way. You're trying to separate you, me, everyone. Trying to separate. Okay.
It's our linear way of doing
Yeah,
things.
I discovered an entity over here, and you go, oh, what are we going to feed it? It's not that. It's part of us. So what if this whole thing were a discovery of awareness that is expanded, and it includes other life forms, if you want to call it that? Yeah.
Could we say it's like we were an extension of a consciousness, and we feel like separate, but we're like going back to united one soul, and we're just, hey, that's who I am?
Can I bring this to a very stupid literal thing? When I was in as an engineer, in the days when we were just working with computers and all, they sold us a computer card that would do something. But what happened was this: the card was complete; it did everything, but you only then opened the little bit of the card by what you paid. So if you paid the company for A, only this much of the card would work. If you paid a lot of money, all of it would work. But it was always all there. What Kryan has said is the DNA in you, sorry, I've touched my microphone, sorry. The DNA in us is like that. It's complete. It doesn't have to be added unto. It doesn't have to be changed chemically. It is complete. And the consciousness we have is starting then to expand or unlock or release it from the prison of an older consciousness. It's already there. And so I love this. I love the questions too, because what we're looking truly at is taking something we already have and expanding it. That's not near as hard as going through a course or a college to learn something that you never learned. It's here. It's always here. And so that is the kind of thing that is, I would say, is new ways of thinking. I love what the conference that you're going to give, the theme of the conference. It's just so appropriate and right on. What I want to tell you is we just got back from Israel, and I met an amazing guy. And this guy is an Arab, and he owns factories. He started as a factory manager in a factory that was in trouble. And this factory, as many do in Israel and in Egypt, they employ both Jews and Arabs, so Jews and Muslims together, building things. And so what happened when they appointed this man to be the factory manager is there was a strike because he was Arab. And so the Jews walked out and all that. Well, they settled that, and finally they realized this guy was great. In fact, not only was the factory working better, but he had a system that nobody had thought of before, where the Arabs and the Jews were really working together. Let me then go on a couple of years. Now he has 5, 10 factories. Now he has his own factories, and they're both in Egypt and also in Israel. And it's one company making, I think it's underwear or something for the West and for China or whatever. And they're all Arabs and Jews working together. When the trouble happened in the Gaza Strip, this was months and months ago, and missiles were being thrown over into Israel, most of the factories that were combined with Arabs and Jews shut down because there was no way they could continue with that kind of frustration that has been ancient on both sides. So you get the picture. His factories continued to work. There were no problems at all. People in business took a look at this. He was just recently, I don't have his name, and that's my fault because I just got back from Israel. It's on a card someplace. He was just on CNN describing to them what he had done. When I had lunch with him, I said, how do you do it? He looked me in the eye, this Arab man, beautiful Arab man. He looked me in the eye and says, I did it with love. I said, you did it with love? And he said, that's the structure of the factories. And I just swooned. I fell over on this one. I go, this is exactly what Kryan is talking about. He's doing something nobody has done before, and it actually has made a difference that you can see. A win-win situation in business and all of these things through love. He's putting opposites together, and he's made it work. These are new business paradigms. It's what you're studying, it's what you're talking about, it's what's coming. The wild card will be those who will come out of these kinds of conferences that go, I found it, I got it, let's try this, let's try that. And these are the things that start to evolve what we do.
And I'm doing this conference with this topic in France because, France has this issue with spirituality, but on an economic level, they're really exploring a lot of different issues, different avenues, I would say, with leadership and how the business is done with, the employees having more decisional opportunity and things like that. So it's an interesting place to study this kind of topics.
It's more than interesting. What if I said to you, what do you think the reason is for Arion? Is it a publishing company, a nice one from Montreal with good esoteric books, or is there something bigger? Could that be in itself a catalyst for evolution for French speakers all over the planet? It had to happen here. Most people don't know that all Cryon books, all the 14 or whatever we have in the French language worldwide have come from Montreal. So mostly read by French people in France. And so
Yes.
this is, you have to look at, is it an accident? Or is Arion postured all the time for the shift that is happening now? And you're right exactly where you should be, especially for Europe.
And we'll be doing this also with some live streaming, make it available also for all those who want to listen to it. And one thing we want to do, maybe in Chile, we'll see in 2018, it's more difficult doing things, organizing events in Chile, but they are quite special also in South America. And the topic we would like to explore is more multidimensionality. What is the nature of multidimensionality? And we know that we as human beings have this potential of not being only on a third dimension with linear thinking, but we have much more. We'll talk about consciousness. And with that question, I would like to bring in the Pleiadian that Cryon speaks a lot about. Could you say more about this multidimensionality and how it's going to be opening us to a wider range of this planet?
You open a door that is a big one. And for the listeners, a difficult one if you don't start at the beginning. And I'm not sure we have a time, so what I do is condense.
Okay.
When Cryon first started talking about the Pleiadians, I didn't like it. And this was years and years ago, because I said, what do ETs really have to do with our consciousness, our spirituality? And Cryon said everything, because they're the seed biology that brought you here. And I said, wait a minute, what about the Adam and Eve story? I was liking that part, and he says, the Pleiadians are the Adam and Eve story. And I said, you're kidding, and because I'm a church boy, and I said, I have a hard time with the space creatures here and the angels here, and how are they getting together? I didn't understand, I didn't realize, and now I do. Here's the bottom line. I went on a search worldwide through my travels, asking all the indigenous I could find worldwide, what's your creation story? And I was just floored that most of the creation story of the planet was the Pleiadians. You've been to Easter Island? It's the Pleiadians. What are the odds that this little 9 by 11 mile island in the middle of the ocean here would have that as their story? The Hawaiians, they have the same thing. Aborigines, 40,000-year-old civilization as documented by the Australian government, it's the Pleiadians. There's something here. So I believe, as so many do, that the Pleiadians, an ascended race, believing in the single source, the one God we do, their job was to bring that to us and give us changed DNA. This is what Greg Braden believes as a scientist, and he reports in his book, Deep Truth, about the structure of DNA and how some of the chromosomes are fused together. We've got 23 instead of the 24 that apes have, all of these kinds of things. So, the Pleiadians, if that's the case, are they finished? And the answer is they were at some level. They're here, they're multidimensional. People who go to Mount Shasta have seen lights and seen all manner of things. But what is their task now? And here's what Christ says, is when we passed 2012, we then said we want to go to the next level. We want elevated consciousness. We want multidimensionality. This is what they have. So they have started to activate another system. And by the way, it's a system that you can read about in the Gaia Effect, published by Irion, which is the nodes and the nulls of the planet. These are 24, if you want to call them stations, that they set up at our creation time in case we would make it, that actually start then to put things into the grid to help advance our evolution. It is a conscious evolution. It's invisible, it's multidimensional, and Krein has started to list what they are, where they are, the pairs that work together. And it's so interesting. In Israel, it doesn't have a node or a null. There's nothing there at all to help. But it's surrounded by three, as in a triangle. And those three nulls have been activated. That is to say, they are paired with others. It's one of the only spots on the planet that has three in a triangle that are paired and working. And he pointed this out, is that that's the time we were supposed to go to Israel. I said, you know about these triads. Mm-hmm. You know of the connections. I've heard you talk about them in energy. These are multidimensional things, difficult to talk about to non-esoteric people. But those who are really get it. That there is forms, there's geometry, all of these kinds of things starting to happen. So the Pleiadian influence is like a parental. They're helping. And it's a multidimensional help that we're getting. They don't have names and faces. The last thing we want to do is worship these guys. And so this is why they've never come to us in a form like this. They're simply helpers because they want the divinity inside to connect to the one source. When we were, can I tell you what the main theme was in Israel?
Yes, please.
It's something that I never thought about. We get in all kinds of controversy and trouble when even on Facebook. As soon as you bring up Israel and you start talking about Israel, there's a division. There's the people who like them and don't like them and whatever. So we're always in troubled area when we talk because it's controversial. Sometimes they would call the chosen people, and Krein explained totally what chosen meant for the Jews. He also, years ago, has talked about their karmic energy, that when you step into the Jewish race, you stay there. You're born a Jew. You don't step out of that. It's not even a race. It has all the attributes of a race, but it isn't. Once you're in that civilization that is Jewish, you don't step out of it. If you do, with free choice, you don't go back in. So it's a pure line. This pure line, by the way, this is not that unusual. Some of the indigenous have the same thing. They have their pure lines, and that's the only ones that have the spiritual power. So this, according to Krein, was necessary for them to do what they were supposed to be here to do. They were chosen to give the planet a unity of one God, monotheism, and they did it. That's what the Jews gave us. The monotheistic earth is what we have today, and you can track it right back to what they gave us. That is half of what they're chosen to do. The second half is they're the only ones who can bring peace to the planet because they're going to solve the Palestinian issue. This is the hardest stuff that they have to do. This is what they're chosen to do. So anybody thinks that they're chosen with milk and honey, that isn't it. They're chosen to do the hard stuff, and they know it, and they're paying a price for it as well. They got the problems. They're also going to have the answers. This is what Krein has talked about for a long time. That's why we were there. We're looking at a new consciousness that they've never thought of, things that they are not aware of yet, that will occur to them, and there may be a Steve Jobs Jew sometime, a wild card that comes in, or a Palestinian who comes in and starts to work in a whole different way and says, look, we got an idea that nobody's ever tried, a reward system maybe, or a love system, that anybody who does this, then they get this and this, instead of a punishment system, or whatever it is. I'm just throwing out what ifs, who knew? But it's something we have never thought of yet. That's why I get excited, because I know what's happened on the planet. You can just look at it. The things that made the biggest differences are the things we had never thought of. And they have changed everything, from our medicine to the science to even to spirituality.
Can you say there's like a concentration of all consciousness in that area, and those who are all conscious, I mean, more warlike, and like the energy is the whole planet. The whole planet is in fact working to solve that, but it is lived there.
Look around you. My parents were involved in World War II. That's how fresh this is. The atrocities that we committed, they committed with the Japanese, with the Germans. Look at it today. We are best friends with them. America even dropped atomic bombs. The only civilizations that ever did that. But despite all that, we're friends. We're allied in trade, in consciousness. There's been forgiveness. We got museums to show what happened. But it's over. It's completely over. It isn't in the Middle East. Everything that has ever happened is in their face and layered. You know, they've got books where pages you can turn and go, here's what they did to us, and here's what they did. Here's the first temple, and here's who destroyed it. Here's the second temple, here's destroyed it. They're still here. We own this place. And then the others who say, look, we were here originally. We don't care what the United Nations said. You know, we're the ones. And it never goes away. Yes, there is old consciousness there. There is an old consciousness that is static and ugly and frustrating in the middle of a modern, very modern society. The oxymoron just hits you in the face when you go there. That will change.
Coming back to the nulls and nodes topic, can we say that these areas are sensible, or how you can say in English? I mean, they will perceive the energy of the new consciousness coming out of human and activate something and accelerate our moving ahead.
Yeah, in fact, you are asking a question that is it's almost untenable to answer, because it depends on something we don't have. That's what a wild card is. A wild card is Steve Jobs. A wild card is the fall of the Soviet Union. Who knew? Anything you can think of that is completely and totally out of the realm of expectation, that you can look back on and go, wow, look what happened. That's what's coming. When it comes is up to us, when we're ready for it. And Krine's not here to give us the future. We're free choice. He's talking about the potentials, and then he's saying, look, it's happened before, so why would you doubt that it could happen now? When you talk to most Israelis, they are so tired of this. When you talk to Palestinians, they are so tired of these things. And in their futures, there's pessimism, they're cynical, and they should be, because nothing has ever worked. We're really ready for a wild card. That's about the only thing. Wild cards are the acceleration that you speak of ideas, of consciousness, and it'll happen quickly, because when anything happens on the planet today, everybody is involved and will know it. You can't hide it. You can't pretend it's not there. If you got a good idea, for the first time on this planet, everybody knows it. It's not going to be captured or sequestered by a corporation or a government or hidden. It cannot be. Gone are those days. So we are wide open for this kind of acceleration.
One last question. Does Cryon inform you of the new topics he will be speaking about? Do you have an idea of what is coming through you in the in the coming months?
Answer is no.
No?
It's always a surprise. Totally surprised. This, if you know my history, I'm a skeptic, as an engineer, I'm very, very linear. I'm stubborn. This was a stretch for me to come and sit in front of a camera 26 years later. I'm used to it, and talk about things that I cannot prove empirically, or that I cannot then give you the chapter and verse and why on all this. And the biggest issue for me has always been, when I sit in the chair in front of thousands of people, is Cryon going to be there or not? Can you imagine me sitting there and going, well, he's at lunch? It's like, no, it's never happened. It's like, it's always here. Cryon has always promised me that this will always be coming out. And I've also noticed that the messages are almost always directed at where I am and who is there. If you start listening to my audios in the various countries, sometimes they're simple, sometimes they're complex. It depends upon who I'm talking to, what the country is, the language. Sometimes Cryon will talk about the attributes of the country that I'm in. One fun one was in Turkey, and he started talking about the unknown history of the planet, how we'd actually destroyed ourselves a number of times, and you're going to find civilizations that prove it, and they're going to be very close to Turkey. So these are the kinds of things I never know what he's going to say.
I know at some places you could talk more about science, and you have more direct information and quantum entanglement, and last night we were speaking more about those who leaves us, the souls of people who are doing a difference in the physical and choosing to leave.
This was new. This brand new information. And Cryon was starting to say, look, you're going to lose a lot of people, and you're going to lose them, and you won't understand why, because they're light workers. They're doing their work, and it looks like they should be here. Everything it says they ought to stay, and they won't. And they'll leave too soon. They have like 30 more years of their life, and they're gone. And we've had this, and we've had, in the last 3-4 years now, I've had numbers of them, and it's hard to understand. You get mad at God and all of that. So Cryon was explaining, look, there is a soul plan that's bigger than the earth plan, but it has to do with the earth. The soul plan has a situation where advanced old souls, that is, old souls who have been here hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes, who really know how this works, are often being like healers and whatever, are leaving early so they can reincarnate and grow up and make a difference sooner in the civilization to come. You are studying in your conference how we can have different systems, how we can be aware of some of the esoterics and the life forms and all. Doesn't it make sense in some way that the specialist in this is going to be needed sooner than later? And so they'll check out now, come back, spend 20 years growing up, and be available when we need them. That's soul planning. And you know what? I don't like it. Can I just say that? Because I want them to stay with me. So these are the hard things that Cryon is starting now to talk about. Practical, system-wide, esoteric things that are what he calls spiritual logic. I like that. As an engineer, I like that.
And one aspect of the last night channeling, there was some information like you just talked about, but I think also there was an energy, ambiance, healing energy of the pain. So it was special. It's like I felt it in this way, but the mental aspect of receiving the information was like going away, and I was just in this healing energy of accepting, and of inside my cellular structure could just let go and accept what's there.
Psychologists would love to have a pill for that. And it is exactly what you say. We break down the barriers of belief. When somebody is shattered emotionally, this is when they're ready for this. You know that. As long as everything is fine in your life, the box is stubborn and it's there, and you're resistant. And then when something happens, you're really open for these. We have this meeting after meeting where Cryon will say, there's an energy in here, open your box. And just accept it. Let it in. and relax. And this is Christ's way of saying, nothing here is going to hurt you because you have free will. That we're not going to control you, but listen up. And this is what we had. This is what we had last night. I'm very pleased that it's there when Christ sits in that chair. Mm-hmm.
Well, once again, Lee, thank you very much of sharing the beauty of what you receive from Cryon and what you share from yourself.
Thank you.